And to our second report on returning veterans, an award-winning documentary follows a Marine from the battlefield in Afghanistan to a troubled life back home in North Carolina. Jeffrey Brown has our look.
In the summer of 2009, the Marines of 2nd Battalion, 8th Marine Regiment pushed hard against the Taliban in an effort to regain control of Helmand Province. Embedded with Echo Company was Dan Fung Dennis, a news photographer shooting video for the first time to capture the fighting against an elusive enemy in and around villages where the welcome from residents was often anything but warm. Dennis's camera caught the combat life and stress of one Marine in particular, Sergeant Nathan Harris, and followed him home after a bullet shattered his hip and broke his leg. But Dennis went further, essentially embedding himself into the home life of the 25-year-old from North Carolina. His difficult readjustment, his painful rehabilitation and growing dependence on medication, and his loving but occasionally tense relations with his young wife, Ashley. Weaving together scenes from the war and the home front, Dan Fung Dennis's film Hell and Back Again won a top award at the Sundance Film Festival, received an Academy Award nomination, and airs tonight on the PBS series Independent Lens. And Dan Fung Dennis joins me now. Welcome and congratulations on this.
Thank you for having me.
I understand that you actually did not set out to make a film, right? So how did this come about?
I've been working as a photojournalist in Iraq and Afghanistan for several years. And even though my images were being published, I felt like they were losing their impact, that after so many years of war, society was numb to these pictures. And so I moved into video. And in July of 2009, I was embedded with Echo Company 2-8 of the 2nd Marine Division during the largest helicopter-borne assault since Vietnam. 4,000 Marines were being dropped into an enemy stronghold. And I was with Echo Company, and we were dropped 18 kilometers behind enemy lines. And I brought with me a custom camera system that was able to shoot very high quality cinematic video.
But what was it you were trying to do that you felt you couldn't do before?
I wanted to use new technology to try to bring people closer to this story, actually show them what was happening on the ground.
And you get real close. I mean, we're watching as you're running along with the soldiers amid the shooting.
On the first day, we were surrounded by Taliban fighters, and the fighting was extremely heavy. It focused around this pile of rubble that became known as Machine Gun Hill. And after the first day, one Marine had been killed, a dozen had collapsed from exhaustion, and nearly all of us had run out of water. And that's when a Marine handed me his last bottle of water. And this was Sergeant Nathan Harris, and this is where we first met. And I could tell he was this courageous leader, a professional, and I followed his platoon as they pushed further into the stronghold.
Well, in fact, he, as we learn, is on his third tour of combat duty. And as he says in the film, early on he had a kind of gung-ho warrior sensibility. He still does to some degree, but now as we meet him, things have got, as he says, hard. I mean, things have really taken a turn.
He was trained from a young age to join the Marine Corps. His father had always wanted him to fight, had trained him to be a warrior. He was a champion wrestler in high school, and he signed up right at the age of 18. And this was his third deployment.
A couple of striking things about the film, I mean, among many things, the access that you got, I mean, both on the battlefield and at home. Did that happen organically, or did you have to work hard at that? How did it happen?
There's always some mistrust between a tightly knit military unit and an outside journalist. Yeah. But after you go through some difficult experiences, they learn to trust you and you learn to trust them. And so I think I was able to get that type of access back at home, especially because I'd been there out in Afghanistan with that platoon and with Nathan.
And so when you found him coming back home when he was injured, you broached the subject, or you raised the idea of actually sort of watching his life as it unfolded, huh?
I didn't actually know the story would follow just him and his
You didn't know
recovery.
at that time?
I just followed it and unfolded. And I was back in North Carolina 6 months after that first initial offensive with the battalion coming home. And it was this emotional reunion with Marines stepping off the buses to their waiting families. And I quickly realized that Nathan didn't get off the bus. And so I asked the men, "Where's Sergeant Harris?" And they said he was hit 2 weeks ago. He had been shot in the hip by a Taliban machine gun round. And so I called him up, and he was just being released from a naval hospital. He was in extreme pain and distress and feeling quite guilty for having left his men behind. Yet he invited me back up to his hometown of Yadkinville, North Carolina, and he introduced me to his friends and family and his wife, Ashley, as this guy was out there with me. And instantly, I was accepted into this rural Baptist community.
Well, you know, the other really striking thing about this documentary, as opposed to more so than most, is the way you weave back and forth between the war and the home front. I want to show, it's hard to capture in a short film, but I want to show a short clip. So this is where we're seeing Sergeant Harris first out in the battlefield and the stress, and then you quickly switch to a scene of him and his wife in the car after they visited the doctor. So let's roll that.
He was on the west side. No! Dotson, I need you to go up there and check the bag, get the turp, talk to these guys, and find out what the is going on.
Do you think I'm lying about it when I tell you I'm getting sick?
No. Just leave me alone. I'm so tired of arguing with you. That was stupid.
I don't know, but you insist.
You better leave me alone.
I was not mean to you. A little bit. Okay? All I said was I didn't want you telling the doctor that we need to switch it to something else. I didn't want you messing me up and not letting me get my medicine. Which I know you won't do, but you even told that other doctor. I mean, I know you were just jumping, I know you're just conversating and talking.
Tell what doctor what?
To Dr. Gaines about me switching medicines to something else.
You said I even told that other doctor something.
Told Dr. Gaines that. I didn't want you to tell the pain doctor that and make them mess me all up.
Tell the pain doctor what? What did I tell
Switch
him?
my medicine. You didn't tell him.
I didn't tell anybody to switch your medicine. I didn't say a word to Dr. Gaines. What are you talking about?
You flying off the handle at me.
No, I told you that, and you just, once again, you don't listen to a thing I ever say.
So he's accusing her of colluding, in a sense, with the doctor, but it's showing the stress. I mean, one of the really interesting things here is this technique of, as I say, of going back and forth, but it's almost a sort of film quality where it's like you're suggesting that of what's going on in his head. What has led to the scene at home, we just see what sort of led to it on the battlefield. Were you conscious of that, and were you, I don't know, a little wary of that, because you can almost go too far with that, right?
I never actually sat down with Nathan and asked him what was going through your head right at this moment. I actually brought in a lot of my own personal experiences of going to war and coming home from it. And what I realized was that the fighting doesn't end when these men come back. It just continues in a different way. It's very personal, very psychological, and becomes an entirely different battle, whether it's with medication, with pain, or relationships. It's an entirely different struggle.
And your own experience, I mean, how much of this is based on your own experience of being in war and then having to deal with what you saw?
I tried to bring in a lot of my own personal experiences of that difficulty of coming back to a society that has very little understanding of what you've just been through. You're coming from this world of life and death and blood and dust to one where it seems like everyone's shopping. And that's very difficult to deal with.
In fact, that's a scene where he goes, that's one of the remarkable scenes where he drives into the shopping mall, right, and just says, boy, I'd rather be back at war. It's just hard to find a parking place, for one thing.
And I think a lot of men and women that return from war feel like that. It's simpler over there. Back here, you have bills and relationships, and all of that seems much more complex. And so I wanted to try to bring these two worlds together of the battlefields of Afghanistan and the complexity of back and home and blend them together. And I used sound and images to try to do that.
You've stayed in touch with Sergeant Harris, I guess. What has happened to him and his family?
We've had an incredible journey together, and he's still an active duty Marine in the Wounded Warriors Regiment, Camp Lejeune, and he's still together with his wife, Ashley.
He wants to go, I mean, part of what he says in this film is he wants to go back. That's not going to happen, I guess.
I think he'll always want to be that infantry grunt that goes back, but he's had that realization that he won't go. He's going to have to stay at home and find a new identity. If he's not that warrior, who is he? And I think that's his next struggle.
All right, the film is Hell and Back Again. Dan Fong Dennis, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.